E lima, e ha, e kolu, e lua.
32, gonna be traffic stop with that vehicle on Bay Street, Portland.
432. Central relay, any units, 1920 has been hit.
10-5.
20, what is your 10-5?
What is it? Where is it? I got hit.
When we got to the scene, it was looked like a war zone. It looked like someone took a whole handful of casings, bullet casings, and threw them from one end of the street to the other. The whole street was just littered with bullet casings.
Welcome to this special edition of On the Beat. As police officers, there is always the possibility that we may be called upon to use deadly force. We may have to make that split-second decision to use our sidearm to save someone's life, and in many instances, our own. How many of us have actually been involved in a shooting incident? Some of us have. During such an incident, many thoughts and questions run through our minds. Am I justified to shoot? How will I perform? Will I remember my training? Can I react quickly enough? And most of all, will I survive? On August 31st, 1994, during a traffic stop in Waipahu, solo bike officer Stan Cook was unexpectedly faced with this reality. In a few seconds, within a distance of about 20 feet, over 30 rounds were fired by both Officer Cook and the suspect. When it was over, Stan had been shot 8 times, sustaining 11 different wounds, and the suspect was killed. With the assistance of Officer Cook, our production unit was able to produce this reenactment for our training purposes. Joining us for this program is Officer Stan Cook. I want to welcome you, Stan, to On the Beat. Thank you for being with us.
Pleasure.
Maybe you can start things off for us by explaining to us what happened before this incident and what led to the shooting.
Sure. Well, we'd just been working on the H1 freeway that morning for the back-to-school jam to assist traffic flow. It was about 8:30. We just completed working the freeway, and we had decided prior to that to meet down in Waipahu to have some breakfast before we went to our selective traffic enforcement area. So I'd taken the Waikele off and turned left on Paiva Street to head down towards Waipahu. Coming up on Hiapo Street, there's a new traffic light there, and it was red, and I noticed this vehicle in the left-hand lane which had an expired plate, which I knew to be an expired plate. It was an old plate, and they'd been out of service for about 3 years, but it had a current tax sticker on it, so I knew there was something wrong. So I decided to pull the driver over, and I asked him to pull in front of me and turn right on Hiapo Street and stop on the bridge. So he pulled over on the bridge on the right-hand side, and I pulled up behind him and got off my bike and went up to the driver's side door and asked him for his driver's license, registration, and no-fault insurance. And I said, well, whatever part of that you have, because I figured he probably didn't have any of it. And he explained to me that it was his wife's car, so he didn't know where the paperwork was. And I said, well, but I need to see some kind of identification. He said, well, he does have a driver's license. And I said, great, show it to me. And he said, well, he doesn't have it with him now. It's at home. And I thought, I've heard that story before. But he did produce an HMSA card with his name on it. So after that, I asked him for his Social Security number and his address and so forth. And I returned to my motorcycle to check with dispatch to find out if, in fact, he did have a driver's license. Lo and behold, she comes back, and he did have a good, current, active driver's license. So I'm thinking, hey, great, the guy was cooperative, and he told me the truth, so I'm going to give him any break I can. So I decided that I was going to tag him for the no-fault insurance, which I'm more or less required to do, and give him warnings for the rest of it. So after writing the citation, scraping the stickers off the license plates, which he told me he didn't know where they'd come from, returned to the driver's side door and explained the citation to him and told him he'd have to sign the citation. Okay, brother. You were up and up with me. You get a driver's license, so I'm just going to cite you for the no-fault insurance tag.
Oh, thank you.
Here's your card. Okay, I'm just going to give you warnings on the rest. Okay? You have to sign my citation book. Brother, I can see what's underneath the jacket.
Oh, it's not enough.
Don't touch the gun! Don't touch the gun!
Not loaded! Wow, sir. You know, now, was there anything that alerted you, or something was wrong that you felt was wrong with the stop?
Nothing in the beginning. This guy was real cooperative, you know, and like I said earlier, because he was being devious and he had things to hide, which I was unaware of at the time. So in the beginning, there was nothing that caught my eye. It was a normal routine traffic stop, something that I thought that I could do quickly and be on my way down to breakfast. After I wrote the citation, before I returned to the car, I wanted to scrape the stickers off, even though I wasn't going to make a case on the stickers, but I wasn't going to let him proceed down the road with those stickers on, so I scraped them off. And during the scraping of the stickers, holding onto the vehicle, I felt some movement in the car. So I popped my head up and saw him returning to a sitting position. And I think even though consciously I may not have been aware, but subconsciously my awareness came up to some level, so that after I returned to the vehicle, I was probably checking inside the vehicle more than I had before.
A little bit more aware then.
Right, right.
Now, when you went back to the vehicle, what did you exactly see in the car? Which part of the gun, or did you see the whole gun?
Well, what happened was I explained the citation to him, and as I normally do, I'm talking to him. He's looking, the driver's looking at the citation, and meanwhile I'm kind of scoping out the car, as I always do. I can't say at this point whether what I saw had been there in the beginning, or maybe he had moved it, I don't know. But at this point I noticed that there was a blue jacket laying on the front seat, and underneath the corner of the jacket closest to the steering wheel, there was maybe a 3 or 4 inch piece of what we know as gunmetal blue sticking out underneath the jacket. Just a corner, and I remember flashing on that it might be a gun, it could have been a radio or a clock or a toy. I had no idea at this point what it was. So I asked him if I could see what was underneath the jacket. And at this point he grabbed the jacket, looked at me and said, well, it's nothing, officer. And when he pulled the jacket, I guess the part of the barrel that was toward the passenger door had stuck on the jacket. So when he pulled it, the center of the jacket lifted up. And that's when I saw the AK-47 laying on the front seat.
And that's when you pulled your gun.
And that's what caused me to draw down on him. And I aimed actually right at his head so he could fully see the barrel pointing at him, and told him twice in no uncertain terms, do not touch the gun.
Okay, then I noticed at one point he did touch the gun. He picked it up and you grabbed it and tried to get it away from him.
Obviously I thought at this point, the first thing was going through my mind that I'm going to be typing up an arrest report. I assumed the guy would give up. Most people would. Unfortunately, I didn't recognize, I didn't know, or I had no idea that he was on drugs. And as I understand now, somebody who is on a crystal meth is very paranoid about what's happening. So he immediately, to my surprise, reached down, picked up the gun right by the center mass. He wasn't holding the trigger. The barrel was pointing away from me, held it up in the air, very near the steering wheel, looked at me and said, but officer, it's not loaded. I thought at this point that I could grab the gun quickly. My first thought was to disarm him, take it away, or maybe he would just surrender it to me. So this was like the second chance he had to surrender.
Right.
I grabbed the gun, and my idea was to pull it out of the car, throw it over on the street somewhere, and then deal with him one-on-one. But I guess because of his strength and because of the drugs, he reached up with his other hand, put his foot on the door, and quickly yanked it out of my hand, giving him control of the weapon.
Okay, Stan, at that point now you retreated. You went to the right rear of the
Yes.
of his car. What was your reason?
Well, the reason I did that is now he had complete control of the gun. I knew that he was strong. I knew that the situation was going sour. Having told me the gun was not loaded gave me no cause to believe that he was telling me the truth, so I needed some cover. Well, the bridge on Imoto Street, there's no trees, there's no fire hydrants, there's nothing there but my motorcycle and his car. And without trying to run all the way back to my motorcycle, which is not all that great cover anyway, figured the mass of his car between him and me would be the best spot. So I ran to the right rear of the car, aimed my weapon through the window, and observed what his actions was going on at that time.
Okay, now this is the I guess the important part in a lot of people's mind. What exactly did you see once you got to that position, and what set your decision into about shooting?
Well, along with that, I always like to say that this is probably his third opportunity to surrender, or what he could have done is started the car and drove away and left me standing there. But I think at this point, because of the drugs and because he knew that he had drugs in the car, which I didn't know at that time, he figured the only way to get out of this action was to take out the officer. So when I went to the back of the car, what I observed now was that he had his hand on the grip of the AK-47, which had a fold-up stock, which was folded up. His finger was on the trigger. The barrel was coming through the driver's side window and moving from right to left in my direction. At this point, I figured there was nothing left to do but to fire, because I was sure at this point that I was going to be fired upon.
Okay, so you shot through the window.
So I shot through the window twice his
window.
center mass. And his center mass.
There was something interesting that happened with that back windshield. You know, we assume that the bullet is going to hit the window, it's going to shatter, it's going to fall down. But what happened in this case?
To me, it was a very surprising thing too, and I hadn't thought about it at the time. I fired 2 rounds, and I lost total vision of the driver. The window didn't cave in; just put 2 holes in there, and it spiderwebbed completely. So I lost total vision of him.
All white at that point.
Which was a instantaneous and momentary surprise to me that probably I wasn't prepared for. And of course, from the time I fired till he fired was like microseconds, and I had no chance to do anything.
And through the investigation, we found that his 2 rounds, he fired 2 rounds, came through the back windshield also. Those are the 2 that hit you.
I think at this point, I don't know for sure. 1 round, I'm sure, hit me. And looking at the news video of his back window, it appears to be one of the rounds was very high and actually clipped the top of the chrome of the window as it went through. So, but I didn't feel any of those rounds. And we talked earlier about the blackout which happened, because after I fired and I heard him yelling at me, then there's a momentary blackout. And to this day, I do not remember what happened, but when I wound up laying in the street on my back, and he was out the window up to his waist, and I just remember seeing the gun fire, pow, 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 and he's yelling at the time.
So what you're saying is, while you're right rear of that vehicle, after his shot, from that point to the time you were lying in the middle of the roadway, that part you don't really remember.
It's totally blacked out, and I don't even remember feeling or hearing his first round, which probably was the point that my mind went blank. And this couldn't have been over 2 or 3 seconds, I think, from the time that I was knocked, and we assumed that I was knocked out into the street from the round that hit right up here.
So I know for the reenactment, what we did was we gave it a best guess to see what would happen. That you were hit, you spun around, and you ended up falling into the middle of the road. It's amazing that you still somehow hung on to your firearm.
I don't know how that happened. I think that for the reenactment, I think it's fairly accurate. I don't see how anything else could have happened, because obviously I wouldn't have run out into the middle of the street into his fire. And yeah, to this day, I thank God, for some reason, my gun was still in my hand. And of course, at that time, I didn't think about it, but in retrospect, looking back on it, you think when you fall, even if you're blacked out, you're usually going to fall on your hands or something.
Has doing the reenactment brought back any fraction of your memory on that part? Do you remember anything more because you actually walked through it again at the same location?
No, I think that the reenactment we did was based on what I remember, and that momentary lapse, I still have no remembrance of it.
Okay, let's talk about pain. I mean, you got shot 8 times. You had 11 wounds. What about the pain?
At the time, there was no pain. And when I explained it to other people, I try to explain it to people that it felt like getting hit with a large boxing glove. That's the best way I can say. Of the 8 hits, the 11 wounds, I only remember the ones that were in my crotch area and the ones that were along my holster side, because I saw those. I saw my body jerk. I saw the movement.
You could actually see the rounds hitting you.
I knew I was getting hit. The one on my arm, the one under my arm, the 2 on my upper torso. I have no remembrance of those at all. And it's a strange thing that, and I've talked about this to a lot of officers. We talk about the slow motion aspect. You go into slow motion. I don't specifically remember slow motion. What I do remember is that my mind seemed to be able to split into like 6 different things. Six things were happening at the same time, which I call number 1 was damage control. I saw I was getting hit, and I guess at the time, because there was no pain, I didn't realize how serious they were, which was probably a good thing because that gives you the will to keep on fighting. I also remember I call fire control. I remember I was trying to aim at him, trying to center mass. I remember seeing a house behind him, and I flashed on the fact that I don't want to overshoot and hit that house, which we did. And I remember seeing a vehicle coming down the street, driving right into the firefight, and then see his back tires light up as he skidded back around the corner out of sight. I also remember thinking about our street survival skills that we were taught. Don't give up, keep fighting no matter what. And I even remember thinking about what I was going to say when I could get back to my motorcycle and grab the microphone to let dispatch know what had happened.
And this is all going on in a matter of...
Simultaneously. In the instance the firing was going on, these things are all happening at the same time, and it's incredible. So what I've surmised is that because your mind speeds up so rapidly and you go into what I call a super hyper overdrive, that your visual references remain the same, which then would give you the impression of things were slowed down, when in reality your mind is speeded up.
Yeah. You know, you were shot, like I said, you were shot 8 times. Is there anything you remember during the time it was going down that you could tell everyone out there that helped you survive or live through it?
You don't have a lot of time to think. You have to react. You have to trust in your training, trust in the survival skills that you've learned, and it really comes from instinct. The survival part of it is the fact that you still are conscious, your mind is still working, your hands are still working, you're doing the things that you're supposed to do, and as we were taught, we shoot to stop. And I continued to shoot until he stopped moving.
Okay, in closing, I know you can talk for a long time on all of this, your experiences, but I want to get your personal feelings. I want to throw up a couple of words to you and see what your feelings are about them. Like the first one would be training.
Training was, to me, was outstanding, the training we received, because it worked. So what I say to anybody is trust in your training. It will work for you. Do the things that you were taught, do the things that you were learned, and that's really all you can do. And it will come through, and hopefully you'll survive.
And I think we talked about this earlier. We had mentioned about how automatically you're loading and unloading with your pistol came out.
So I fired the first 16 rounds, noticed the slide had come to the rear, and I remember while I was reloading, my mind flashed on, wow, this is going great. The reload really works.
It's also automatic.
It's all automatic. And so when you're training, when we go out to train, we go out to shoot, all of that drawing and reloading rapidly as we are taught, all has a reason. It's not just something that you do just because we want somebody to load fast. That in a crisis situation, you don't have the time to think about, well, which flap I'm going to open, which button I've got to push, and I drop the slide, which lever I've got to push to have the slide run forward and run the next round up the battery. So those things have got to be almost automatic. I even mentioned to you earlier that whenever I go to court and I have to put my gun in the gun locker, I never take my gun out, I always draw it. And I've done this ever since I've been a police officer, and I think that helped also, because at the time I noticed the weapon in the car, when I drew down on him, it was out and there.
It's automatic.
Automatic.
That was good. Okay, the second word, Stan. Second word would be, I know you touched on it, but survival.
Right, survival is, I think, instinctive in most people, in anybody, even somebody who's not a police officer. And as a police officer, of course, we study even more. We're taught in the academy survival skills. We are taught in service training survival skills. The training keys that come around during lineup are important. And put those in the back of your mind and trust that they'll be there. Because it is, even though you're a hit, we hear this so many times about officers who have been hit and give up. And it wasn't even a critical wound, and they would wind up getting shot because of that. And I don't know that it was anything special that I did, but in this circumstance, even though I knew I was getting hit, it made me mad more than anything else. And they may have been, and I found out later there were some fairly substantial internal wounds that were life-threatening. But I didn't know that at the time, and I didn't want to think about it. My object was to stop the threat. That was the immediate thing to do, was to stop the threat, stop this gun from shooting at me. And that was totally on my mind. And that was the survival portion.
Okay, and then the last part, the last one is something that's kind of personal, but family.
Yeah, family is very important. Maybe that should even be the first word that we talked about. We have more than one family. We have 3 families that I remember most of all. Our police family is important. Your brother and sister officers, the ones who came immediately to the scene to assist, the ones who sent words of encouragement in the hospital, and the ones to this day walk up and say, hey, glad to have you back, and you did a good job, and so forth. Our police family is very, very important, and the support that you get from your police family helps you to survive and helps you to recover. The other family is the local community, which rallies behind the police in many cases. We don't always get good PR, and sometimes it's wrong. And in this case, because of what happened, the public was behind us 100%. Hundreds of letters and flowers and things in the hospital, and even since then, people still walking up, even to this day, which is over a year later, and shaking your hand and say, you did a good job and glad to have you back, and we're really happy you're out there. And of course, then your own personal family. And I'm not putting that last because it is last, it's not. Your family, particularly your wife or your girlfriend, are there for you. And I think that they have found strengths. I know my own wife found strengths in her that she didn't know she had. And those kind of strengths, the family support, the belief in God, sustains you through the recovery. My wife was just outstanding. And one thing that we always have to remember is that we become police officers, and in many cases, and in particular in my case, I more or less told my wife I was going to become a police officer. I didn't really ask her, and I think my wife is the type of person that wants a man to do what a man's got to do. So sometimes you're going to feel a little bit guilty when things happen. Maybe you only get scratched or you're injured, you come home with a hurt finger, or you may get shot. So don't be surprised when you feel guilty, and I felt guilty about the tragedy that my family was going through. And through all this, they were behind me 100%. And believe me, that helped to a quick recovery.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Stan. I know it was just, to share a personal side. That's real good of you. As a reminder, this program was not designed to focus in on our state laws or department directives. It was developed to allow Officer Stan Cook to share an episode of his career with all of us. And that's about it for this program. We hope that it has enlightened you on a situation that affects us all. Until next time, we'll see you on the beat. Aloha.
About 6 months after the shooting happened, we were driving around in our area, and we saw a solo biker coming by in the opposite direction. And as he drove by, he waved to us, and we waved back, and it was Stan Cook. And I couldn't believe that it was Stan Cook coming back to work so soon.
Street.